crushing, in the pressing, you are making new wine. In the soil I now surrender, you are breaking new ground.
So I yield to you into your care. When I trust you, I don't need to understand.
Make me your vessel, make me an offering, make me whatever you want me to be. I'm here with nothing but all you have given me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me.
In the crushing, in the pressing, King, new wine. It's
He's frozen.
you are breaking new ground. You are breaking new ground. Swear, make me an offering,
Make me whatever
you want me to be.
came
I'm here with nothing but all you have given me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me.
Jesus, bring new wine out of me.
Jesus, bring new wine out of me.
New wine, there is new power. Oh, internet. There's new freedom. The kingdom is here. I lay down my old flames to carry the new fire today.
'Cause where there is
New wine.
there is new power. There is new freedom, and the kingdom is here. I lay down my old flames to carry all the new fire today.
Hey, gee, who's that? Make me your vessel. Make me an offering. Make me whatever you want me to be.
God, I came here with nothing but all you have given me. Just bring new wine out of me.
Jesus, bring new wine out of me.
Jesus, bring new wine out of me.
Yeah, internet's acting up. Yeah, I kind of figured out what's happening. That's okay. That's the internet and Smule. I'm gonna save that just so Patty can pack it. Let's do it. Hey, it happens, brother. It's all good. We're starting the broadcast then. So we're gonna take this. It looks like Facebook's being what I would call a turd tonight, and it's not allowing me to start up. So if you're Facebook, I'm so sorry. JR is in the house. Thank you so much for the super hearts. Who is that? Chris gave me super hearts too. God, you guys are awesome, and I do appreciate that. Crispy Scope, yep. Chris and Disney Baby. Hey, how's it going? It was convenient timing, I guess. So we're gonna get started with the broadcast over here. guys, if you're on any of the other platforms, make sure you turn your phone this way, because then that way you'll be able to see it. Unless you like to see the smaller screen and watch the comments, it's up to you. But I figured I'd just make that note. All right, so I'm going to start up over here, guys. We're going to do our little red guys on the rest of the platforms, guys. Just to let you know, tonight we're broadcasting on, well, sort of on YouTube. We're on YouTube, YouNow, DLive.io. Let me get rid of the echo so you guys can actually hear me. There we go. It's much better. Liz, there you are, Liz. So YouTube, YouNow, DLive.io, Periscope, Facebook. That's on my personal account, so just look for my name, Jason Wallace. Twitch, the Bible Time one is not working tonight for some reason. Twitch, Smashcast, FC2, Peaks, Mixer, Instajib, Vaughn Live, Africa TV, OK.ru, and of course on Smule. And Smule is a singing app, and this is all part of it. So I'm going to get it going over here. We're going to let this... Thank you so much for those super hearts. You guys are awesome. That helps me get microphones and headphones and cameras and computers and all that other stuff. So I do really, honestly, I do appreciate it. And just to show you, your super hearts bought this microphone. It's not the best one, but it sounds okay. So, all right. And this is what we do. So, you guys on Smule, hold on a minute. Or if you want to go take a look at one of the other platforms, you can find me. Just do hashtag Jesus Did It or hashtag Sing Pray Love, and you'll find it. Do allow... I don't care about what your orientation is. Everyone's allowed here. Absolutely. Brother wants to watch? Oh, I'm sorry. I really didn't think that people would use those words like that, especially when they got 0 followers. Thanks for joining, and you are spam. Goodbye. All right, there we go. Yeah, we take care of clean. Yeah, sounds like a troll, and he was. And so we wash him under the... That's it. Under the door. See you later. All right. So, so welcome to the broadcast. We're going to run the normal thing that we normally do, the red people. So here we go. And, while that's running, you guys over here get to... Welcome back, everybody. Thanks so much for joining on the broadcast. I'm just going to get over here and share something else out real quick, and we will be able to focus then. So, Jason. There I am. Okay. All right, so just to get through some of the formalities, thank you so much for sharing out. Thank you for all the tweets, retweets, all of the invites, follows, and shares. Who's that? Josh. Thanks so much, Josh. Thank you so much. I hope everybody's doing well. So glad to see the Periscope peeps coming back. Wizard V popped in for a second. Now he's gone. All right. So make sure you're sharing out. Thank you so much for all the likes, the follows, the shares, especially on Super Hearts. And Super Hearts help out unbelievable amounts. When we're able to meet the minimum requirements, it really turns out well. So, so thanks for coming. All right, so who am I? I am Jason Wallace. I'm a believer and follower of Jesus Christ. I'm a prayer warrior. I'm an intercessor. That means I'll pray for you. I'm a Bible reader. I'm a devoted husband and father. I am a child of God. I am a live jam host for Sing Pray Love. I am a child of God. I'm a new creation in Christ. I'm a citizen of heaven. I am a child of God. I already said that, didn't I? I'm apparently not paying attention tonight. That's all good. I'm a member of Christ's body and I'm a friend of Christ. I'm righteous and I am holy. Right? Because the Bible tells us that. The Bible tells us that we are lots of things. The world tells you so much, right? You're not good enough. You're never going to do better than what you're doing right now. And these are people probably in your house telling you this stuff. And you know what? God has better for you. God knows, is written better for you. He said that you are these things. You're redeemed. You're righteous. You're holy. You are healed. You are all kinds of things. And it's all written in His Word. And so definitely you want to do that. Definitely get yourself to understand who you are in Christ, right? So not only believing, but knowing who you are is really important. So if you check out the website at jesusdidit.org, you'll be able to download the I am statement. So there's a whole list of them. It's a red arrow. You click on the download, and it will be able to download the I am statements. And in there, it has the what you are, plus the Bible verse, so that way you can go through it and check it out yourself, and make sure that we're not fibbing on you, and that that you really are what those things that God says you are, and that is the most important thing. Pastor Rick Costa, thank you so much for joining. Seeker of Truth, thank you for sharing out to 5 bajillion people, and yeah, that's awesome. So let's see. All right, let's get back over to here. There we go. Alrighty. Oh, what happened to that program? Well, that ain't gonna work out well. Hold on. I'm sorry. I'm like so disoriented today. On either Facebook page? Facebook. Facebook is being a bit agitating for me lately, because they have been not so well with it. I don't got time to fix it. I'll take the recording and put it up there. That's what I'll have to do, unfortunately, because it's not working. They're probably rejecting it. Anyway, they've been doing that too, because there's a lot of people doing it. Yeah. All right, AirPlay service. Why aren't you running? There we go. There we go. So now I should be able to screen. Where are you? There we go. Don't know what's up with that. Tell Jason about your experiences. What experiences we got? Did I miss something on the broadcast? Come on now. Share. Alrighty. So you can join us on the Facebook group. Facebook is not being nice to you, me, or Rick, huh? Yeah, I don't know. It's probably most likely I have to rekey all the stuff, because they probably required me to change the keys. It's been about 30 days since the last one, so with the software you got to key it. It's a little bit different than that. Yes, we're carrying on. I have my admin over here helping me through it. There we go. All right. Moving on. So, JesusDidIt.org is a website. You want to check it out. There's some really cool shirt there. Check out the one that says, "Hey, conservative atheist, thanks so much for joining." There's a really cool shirt there. It says, "Keep calm and wash your hands." I like it. I like it a lot. Alrighty, and the next group that I'm affiliated with is the Sing Pray Love. And Sing Pray Love is a live jam ministry on the Smule app, as well as the couldn't get to work on it either. Yeah, Sing Pray Love is a live jam ministry. So we jam, worship, family friendly, and we just really spend spend a lot of time on the Line app as well, sharing just all kinds of stuff. So keep calm and wash your hands. Yep. And so check it out, singpraylove.net. You can see the schedules for all of the jams that are associated. There's a Sunday night talk show, a Monday night worship, this one, Wednesday night worship, Friday afternoon with Marika, and then with worship, and then family friendly Friday on Friday night, and then every once in a while they do like a Netflix and Smule thing, so that's kind of cool. So like they watch a movie and then they mark down all those songs that were in the movie, and then they go on the Smule and sing the songs. So that's kind of cool. So kind of a cool ministry. Hey Chris, thanks for joining. So kind of cool ministry, very active, and yeah. So getting into our Bible reading tonight, as soon as I can get my screen moved over to the right place. There we go. Alrighty. Alright, so tonight we're reading from Psalm 133. And so Psalm 133, let me get a drink. Netflix and Smule. I know, isn't it? It's kind of catchy. And it's fun. If you like to sing, the live jams are awesome. It's just a fun thing to do. And you can participate as much as you want or as little as you want. It's really a nice ministry. All right, so we got a really long psalm tonight. It's 3 verses. All right, so we read from the New King James Version of the Bible, just because it's easier for this noggin to understand it. And so, plus it's a little bit plainer of English. Plus it's more complete than some translations. We also use the blueletterbible.org website. That's so long. Yeah. It is very long. Blessed unity of the people of God. All right. So blueletterbible.org is the website. It's got lots of nice tools to be able to help you understand the words, understand context, which is really important, especially as you start becoming. It's longer than Psalm 19. I dreaded that night. That night was a very long night reading that. I read that all the way through. That was a long night. Anyway, Psalm 133. Blessed unity of the people of God. A song of ascents of David. Behold, how good and how pleasant is it for brethren to dwell together in unity. Ooh. It is like the precious oil upon the head, running down on the beard of Aaron, running down on the edge of his garments. It is like the dew of Hermon, descending upon the mountains of Zion. For there the Lord commanded the blessing, life forevermore. Hey, Ken. And I forgot to hit the freestyle again. You know what? We're gonna do it again. Sorry. It was kind of short, so we'll do it again. I gotta put up some yeah. I gotta put up some sticky notes. All right. Psalm 133. Blessed unity of the people of God. A song of ascents of David. Behold, how good and how pleasant is it for brethren to dwell together in unity. It is like the precious oil upon the head, running down the beard of Aaron, running down on the edge of his garments. It is like the dew of Hermon, descending upon the mountains of Zion. For there the Lord commanded the blessing, life forevermore. That is the reading for today. There we go. do one more. All right, and so we read from the also from the. So does that switch it? We do our devotional tonight as well. So we're doing the Our Daily Bread. Our Daily Bread is a free publication. You might be able to get it at your church, online, wherever. You can go to odb.org and you can go get your own copy. Or if you're in the Buffalo area and you happen to be around, send me a direct message and we'll meet up, have coffee or something after the coronavirus. It's all over. What's going on, Raul? Thanks for joining. Brethren, so we understand. Brethren? Brethren's like brothers, like family, like, you know, people you commune with. Alrighty, so let me get started with this. Alright, so today's reading from the Our Daily Bread for Tuesday, March 24th. The title is The Bell. Jackson dreamed of becoming a U.S. Navy SEAL from an early childhood, an ambition to lead to years in physical discipline and self-sacrifice. He eventually faced grueling tests of strength and endurance, including what's referred to as trainees as Hell Week. Jackson was physically unable to complete the exhaustive training and reluctantly rang the bell to inform the commander and other trainers of his choice to leave the program. For most, this would feel like failure. But in spite of the extreme disappointment, Jackson was later able to see his military failure as preparation for his life's work. The Apostle Peter experienced his own form of failure. He boldly proclaimed that he would remain loyal to Jesus, even to prison or death. Yet, later he wept bitterly after he denied that he knew Jesus. But God had plans beyond his failure. Prior to Peter's denial, Jesus informed him, "I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it." Are you struggling with a failure causing you to feel unworthy or unqualified to move on? Don't let the ringing of the bell of failure cause you to miss God's greater purposes for you. Question for today. What did you view as a failure in your life that God used to help you grow in Him? And why is it vital for us to find our identity in who God views us? So good questions for today. The prayer for today says, God, help me to use every circumstance, even my failures, for your glory and honor. Amen to that. That was written by Evan Morgan. And the scripture for today is Matthew chapter 16, verses 13 through 20. And the key verse for today is Matthew 16:18. I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. What's going on, Sev? Thanks for joining. Yeah. That's good stuff right there. It makes you stop and think, you know, what failures in my life, right? What things have I failed at, you know, that I could use towards God, right? Towards God's glory. Yeah. There's probably some there, so think about it. Let us know. Alrighty. Welcome. Alright, there we go for that. Alright, guys, if you have any prayer requests or praise reports, we'd definitely love to pray with you and for you. And if you feel led to pray, let's do that. Let's pray to our God. She calls me JR. That's awesome. Hey, don't forget to share out, guys. Share out all the jams, all of the that's what I'm doing right now while I'm talking to you guys. So I'm not ignoring you. I am sharing out my 50 at a time, or whatever it is, or 25 at a time. 25 at a time, so you can worship. There it is. Oh, I almost messed up the whole thing. Did you just start? We are actually at prayer time, so if you have any prayer requests or praise reports, we'd love to pray with you, for sure. Making sure I'm not missing any comments over here on Periscope. Ha. 63 viewers, wow. You missed the Bible and devotion, but I think you can watch the playback on Periscope. Yes, you watch it on Periscope or YouTube. Should be on those. Facebook, I don't know what's going on with Facebook, why it's being such not so good. It was being bad. They're actually saying that there was issues with YouTube, not with Facebook, so very interesting. You're watching your church online? Yeah. No, that's important too. Definitely support your local church. Which platform has the most viewers? I would have to say the most people that come into a broadcast is the one on Smule. There's more right now. There was at one point I was getting like 1,300 people on Periscope, but it's just not been so good lately. Yeah. No prayer requests. We're just going to pray over the whole broadcast. And, yeah, just cover for this coronavirus is going on. Yeah, it looks like it's working on YouTube. So I got a hi, what's new from Raul. So it looks like it's working. Yeah, it's working. YouTube's working. So you can definitely get it on YouTube. Just search for my name, Jason Wallace. Did you hear about the 5.5 earthquake? No, there was an earthquake there. Periscope is down for everyone, yeah. Did not hear about that. It's like, I try not to pay attention. We were on Facebook, had to switch to YouTube. Yeah, Facebook's being very, very, very interesting. Instagram has live too if Facebook stops working. Yeah. Then I need another device. Actually, I think I got one. You burnt the cookie. That's unacceptable. You can't be burning cookies, man. Come on now. Oh, that's so funny. All right, it's no prayer request. We're gonna just pray for that earthquake. I'm not quite sure where was it. Where was it? I've not been paying very much attention to other than I heard that the Olympics is now postponed till 2021, but it's still going to be called the 2020 Olympics. Pray for a doctor visit. Absolutely. Crotia. Okay. I haven't. Crotia. Yeah. Let's do that. All right, let's come into prayer. Father God, we just thank you so much for this opportunity to be able to spend a little bit of time just honoring you and glorifying your name and just getting into your word and trying to understand you a little bit more. God, we thank you for everything that you give us, everything that you protect us with.
God, I just pray for grace for the doctor visit. God, we just ask that you cover over that. God, let that be a good outcome in Jesus' name. Father, we lift up those who may have been injured, or the things going on in Croatia with that earthquake. God, we just ask for a quick turnaround, and for that to be everything to be rebuilt, and without any difficulties. God, we just ask this in Jesus' name. If anybody's hurt, let them be healed in Jesus' name. Father God, we just thank you so much for everything that you do for us. God, we ask for those who are sick with this coronavirus, God, that you just heal them in your mighty and powerful Son's name. God, and protect those of us who are here and just listening to the government's suggestions about keeping distances and keeping things cleanly. God, we just ask for a cleansing over us. God, allow us to have that protection, and Lord, we know that there's going to be something good coming out of this coronavirus, even though there may be some people lost, and God, we just we look to you for that guidance for us to be able to show us what that is, what our direction is, how you want us to use this situation to better glorify you. God, give us that wisdom. In your mighty and powerful and amazing Son's name we pray. Amen. Amen. Okie dokie. I think we got some prayer done there. And it's frozen again. Why is it frozen? It is real etchy tonight. I don't know why. Oh, it's on the wrong Wi-Fi. That's why. Hold on. It'll be fixed in a second. There we go. We're sorry. We couldn't reach the network. Alright, hold on one second, guys. I'll be right back. There was a problem. Of course there was. Uh-oh. I got issues. I got issues. Your brother is in New York? Oh no. Hopefully he's well there. Yeah, I'm frozen. She's frozen. Give it a minute. It'll fix itself, hopefully. Now look at that song stuck in my head. New wine. Alright, let me close AirPlay and we'll open it back up again. Ever since I've updated to the new version of Windows 10, it's been nothing but causing me difficulties. Why is that so bad? It's not real bad. Edgy with you. Is etchy? Like the screen is good? Because it's really bad on this phone. It's on the right Wi-Fi. You bought like 50 rolls of toilet paper and water and food, and you're staying in for 2 weeks. There we go. Alright, okay, now it looks better. Alright, AirPlay's on. Let's go and AirPlay this bad boy. There it goes. There it goes. Now we'll be able to bring the picture in, maybe. There it goes. Alright. Okay. Love that song. Yeah, we just sang it with Pat. But it got smuled pretty good, so it got smuled real good. It was almost perfect timing at the end of the song. Alrighty, so we're getting into our worship time of this broadcast, and it is freezing. Wonderful. Thank you. I see what those RJ are on here. I don't see them on my iPhone though, but I see them on the I see them on there. So I keep freezing. Oh goodness. Sue, I'm gonna pick you up if you don't mind. I'm just gonna pick Sue up so she can help me for a second, and then I'm gonna switch back over to this guy and grab my. Oh, it's already hooked up.
Might need to restart.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to. Something's not right. So, hold the room up. All right, so I'm hopping out of there, guys. Just give us a second with the with this because this is unfortunately this is part of the deal with Smule sometimes is the software gets a little weird and it is very temperamental with you know, when your internet's really low. So give me a minute and we'll get back on as soon as I make sure I'm on the right Wi-Fi, because I think that might be the problem. It's exactly what the problem is. I'm not on the right Wi-Fi. Is this new wine? No, not country air. Get back here. I want to know free Wi-Fi. Sue's holding the room for me over there. I can see her. Alright. Smule. Nevada. Don't have a ton of masks. As long as you don't have a ton of masks, you can buy anything. I got no masks. I don't need that stuff. I mean, I seen people walking around today with a whole bunch of them. Just like, whoa. Some people like suited up, like really suited up. Suited up. There we go. Yeah. And there we are. There we go. Thank you so much. And we're back. So hopefully now it'll be good because I'm on the right Wi-Fi. I was definitely not on the right Wi-Fi before. And Massachusetts here is not horrendous, but gets real bad. We haven't even started. That's what they're saying. They're saying that we're not even on the half of it. Like, we're not even halfway there yet in our area. Much better. Yes. So. Oh, there was, Yvonne was on the thing. I wonder what happened to her. But that's okay. I'll sing with Sue. Alright, let me, oh, darn it. I'm a hot mess tonight. I really am. I'm just a hot mess.
What are you doing?
Well, you know, I was like frozen. Now it's frozen, and now it's acting silly. I've been disconnected from the group chat. Really? Oh, goodness. Where's my Wi-Fi? What the? I swear to goodness. This thing is not playing well tonight at all. This is not playing well.
You figure.
Oh, I know it's because there's just tons of people and, you know, the internet's just clogged up. That's all it is.
So you figure and I'll sing.
Oh, what are we singing? Pray over that device. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. The headphones recommended. This thing's having issues today. What in the world?
I'm just gonna pull something up that you don't have to concentrate on. Fix
Yeah.
your stuff.
Just pick some stuff. Loading song. It is all. Yep. I think I lost internet. viruses don't spread between May and October. Yeah, this mule is having lots of issues tonight, guys. So, yeah. I don't understand why, but it is. So, oh, you were sitting there like looking like, I'm like, oh no, don't tell me she's frozen now.
Oh, it dropped me.
I know, it kicked you, it kicked me too. Um, yeah. Alright, looks like maybe if it stops swirling. Oh, she's gonna pick a song I know.
No, you don't have to know it.
No.
I'll sing. You
Okay,
pick
no.
stuff.
That's fine. We're good.
So done, so over being afraid.
Acapella.
I've gone through the motions, I've been back and forth. I know what you're thinking, you've heard this before. Don't know how to say it, so I'm just gonna say it, yeah. Fear you don't own me, there ain't no room in this story. And I ain't got time for you telling me what I'm not like. You know me, well guess what? I know who I am, I know I'm strong. And I am free, got my own identity. So fear you will never be welcome here. Take a minute, let it settle in. You probably never saw it coming. And something's gotta give, so I give up you. There's no room for you here, yeah, I've had enough. And no vacancy sign on my heart is lit up. In case you didn't hear it, then here it is again. Fear you don't own me, there ain't no room in glory. And I ain't got time for you telling me what I'm not like. You know me, well guess what? I know who I am, I know I'm strong. And I am free, got my own identity. So fear you will never be welcome here. Is there anybody out there just like me? Anybody needing fear to leave? If you don't know how to say it, sing along with me. See, you don't own me, there ain't no room in this story. And I ain't got time for you telling me what I'm not like. You know me, well guess what? I know who I am, I know I'm strong, brave, and I am free, got my own identity. So fear you will never be welcome here. Goodbye, goodbye, fear. Oh, you will never be welcome here.
Thank you.
How are things going over there? There's no age limit, PG.
No, there's no age limit. As long as you're respectful and stuff like that. It's still being a fool, but I think it's working now. Okay. We'll give it a go. I need to be on that side, by the way.
Yes, I'm gonna drop and let you pick Patty up.
Thank you so much. Just passing through. Thanks for joining, Angel.
Sue is pretty awesome. You're getting lots of accolades over there, Sue. Just by the way, there was some clapping in the hands and people saying that you sound very good. Just saying. All right, Bet. You're 11. Yeah, I guess so. As long as you know a worship song. If you know any worship songs, fine. Yeah, you, Sue, you're getting like some people giving you like, listen, here's the comments. Where was it?
Oh boy.
Someone wrote, she's good. And then someone wrote 100%.
She is really good.
For sure. Yeah, she is. And then
I got to sing with her last
Chris
night.
said,
She was really good. Oh my gosh.
Sue is awesome. See?
Sue,
So,
you're amazing.
See? Just saying. All right, let me flip
Just
over.
saying.
Just saying, exactly. What song are we singing? Well,
See Victory by
she says,
Elevation.
well then, thanks. See a victory. I am not typing fast tonight. I hope I know this one. Maybe I do. It's on the radio. I'm gonna give you
Fairly often, yeah.
I'm gonna give you part 1, just in case I don't.
Sounds good.
Awesome. I think I know.
The weapon may be foreign, but it won't prosper. And when the darkness falls, it won't prevail. 'Cause the God I serve knows only how to triumph. My God will never fail. Oh, my God will never fail. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. Oh.
There's power in the mighty name of Jesus. Every war he wages, he will win. I'm not backing down from any giant, 'cause I know how the story ends.
Yes, I know how this story ends. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. You turn it for good.
You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. You turn it for good.
You take what the enemy meant for evil and and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. Oh, you take what the enemy meant for evil, and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. You take what the enemy meant for evil, and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. You take what the enemy meant for evil, and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. And I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. You take what the enemy meant for evil, and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. You take what the enemy meant for evil, and you turn it for good. You turn it for good. Oh, oh,
Yes.
I'm probably gonna get a text message about that one. Woo! Be like, dude, I can hear you. That's what I usually get. That was awesome, Pat. Thank you so
that
much.
was amazing. I love that song so much.
That's a great song. I don't remember it all the time, and now I'm like, man, I want that song. Thanks so much. I'm gonna pick up Sue. Come on back around again. We'll do another one.
Of course, I will. I plan on it. All right, we'll see you later.
Thanks, buddy.
Hello.
Hey, there's Sue, guys, by the way. You couldn't see her earlier because she was hidden on the screen, so now you can see her.
Oh, it's hidden?
You were hidden because the screen was acting a turd, so
Oh.
it was not acting well. Oh,
Beg your pardon, press stop.
good.
You know this.
I get pitchy.
Well,
It's one of my pitchy songs.
I'm pitchy all the time, so.
You gonna do a sermon, Josh? That's cool. Can't wait.
Is that Periscope you're reading all the comments on?
Yes.
Because I can't see the comments when I'm on Periscope.
He's coming on the clouds. Kings and kingdoms will bow down. And every chain will break as broken hearts declare his praise. Who can stop the Lord Almighty?
Our God is the Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power and fighting our battles, and every knee will bow before him. for the sin of the world. His blood breaks the chains.
And every knee will bow before the Lion and Lamb.
Every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb.
Oh,
So open up the gates, make way before the King of Kings. Our God who calls to save is here to set the captives free. Who can stop the Lord Almighty?
our God is the Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power and fighting our battles.
And every knee will bow before him. Our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sin of the world. His blood breaks the chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Oh, every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Oh.
Who can stop the Lord Almighty?
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 Oh, who can stop the Lord Almighty?
Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Oh, who can stop the Lord? Our God is the Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power and fighting our battles.
Every knee,
Every knee will bow before him. Our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sin of the world. His blood breaks the chains.
and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb.
Oh, every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Oh, every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Oh, every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb.
I think we done good that one.
All right.
Let's see, anybody list? Oh,
Yes.
Grace. Thank you. It didn't ask me to save.
Didn't?
No. That was weird. Marika was having the same problem the other night. It wasn't asking her to save. So weird.
Hey,
Hello.
are you cross-platforming and anyone else can see you besides who's in the room?
Yes.
Oh,
If, let me see. If you would like to drop, let me see. Well, considering Periscope's being not so, something's going on there with
are they being judgmental?
No.
Because I don't want to sing in front of judgmental people.
No, they're absolutely
And
not
this is
judgmental.
Tori, by the way. I
Yes.
changed my name.
Oh. It says VBX Grace. It's weird.
I know because I need grace right now, and
Got it.
VBX is where I live.
I got it.
like OBX, Outer
Right.
Banks. But I need grace.
We all need it.
I
would you
need
like-
extra grace.
What do you feel about You Say?
I was gonna sing the
Where you
one
go?
you said you had in your head.
What one was that? Because there's always a good song in my head.
New Wine.
Oh.
Did you want to sing it?
Yeah, we can do that.
I had the feeling you might want to sing it, so I thought I'd jump in here.
Yeah, we started
But I
off.
don't really wanna
we
be
started off
cross-plat.
with it. But
Oh, please, dear Lord. What do you...
that's going on with us. Might be
Mm-hmm.
smuling. I'm not sure. You want one or two?
Don't care.
I did part one last time, so I'll give you part one.
Okay. Oh, are we doing the shorter version of it?
Yes, yes. Yes,
I got called
definitely.
out for being a 15-minute worship song.
That's okay.
In the crushing, in the pressing, you are making new wine. In the soil I now surrender. You are breaking new ground.
So I yield to you and your careful hands. When I trust you, I don't need to understand. Make me your vessel. Make me an offering. Make me whatever you want me to be.
'Cause Lord, I came here with nothing, but all you have given me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me.
In the crushing, in the pressing, you are making new wine. In the soil I now surrender. You're breaking new ground. You are breaking new ground. So make me your vessel. Make me an offering. Make me whatever you want me to be.
'Cause Lord, I
Came here with nothing, but all you have given me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me.
Jesus, bring new wine.
Oh no, Smil. Jesus, bring new wine out of me.
'Cause where there's new wine, there is new power. There is new freedom, and the kingdom is here. I lay down my offerings to carry a new.
All right, we'll be right back, guys. Sorry, it's soft. Oh my goodness. This app is so silly sometimes. I knew it was coming too. Yep, I got smuled. All right, yes. All right, why don't you drop? I'll pick you back up again.
Or I'll just pass it.
Oh,
That was good. We were
Thank-
doing good.
we were doing really good too. Everybody's like, oh shoot, not again.
Okay, you want me to drop?
You can
right?
drop, yes, thank you.
Okay.
Smule is not kind to me today. It is
not being kind to me today at all. But I've learned my lesson. I have my backup camera and I have my backup microphone. So I am all set when it does decide to break. I'm good. So new wine that we're getting, guys, we're saying is beautiful. Thank you so much. Braden Jackson. I've sung with you before.
What's up, man?
How's it going?
It is going fine.
Yeah.
How about your stuff?
What kind of word you got? What do you want to? What do you want to read? What do you want to sing tonight?
Let me think. What are you feeling?
Let's see what's in our duets.
Have you ever heard Holy Spirit? It's like Holy Spirit.
You
Is it Carrie Joe?
Come here. Yes. That's definitely.
Yeah, we could
Carrie
do
Joe.
that.
You want to do that?
Yeah,
one?
we could do that.
Yeah, let me pull that one up then. In our list, so let's just go grab it.
There was this one verse that, because, you know, all these churches are going online, and it's kind of like, man, you know, it's good I'm glad they're online, but I miss, like, congregating, you know what I'm
you
saying?
miss being in a church. Me
Yeah,
too.
miss being with people. But like the thing is, it's like I forgot what verse. But see, we don't walk by sight, but you know, by faith.
By faith.
And then
not by sight.
after, and then that verse right after, it's kind of like I don't know. I would have to pull it up. I wish I had another. I don't know, but it's really good. Like the verse right after, kind of. But I wish I had it on me. Man, it's okay.
Walk by faith. Hold on, well, I'll pull it right up right now. 'Cause if it's on
And it's
you,
the verse after, and it's talking about spiritually, you know, being with the Lord. But if you really think about it, both ways. Which I think my Bible was in my truck.
2 Corinthians
Yeah, it's
2 Corinthians
read
5,
that and then the
7.
verse right after.
5, 7, and 8. So let's go 5,
Yeah.
7, and 8. And we're gonna go pick so 5, 8. And we'll go with the New King James Version. So we are confident, yes. We are well pleased rather to be absent from the body and to be present with the Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was just I forgot what the Holman, the HCSB.
Oh, you do. You're still Holman. It's okay.
Yeah.
Holman Christian.
So
And we are confident and satisfied to be out of the body. Let me pull it up here real quick because I just clicked on it. Of course, it worked that time.
yeah.
For we walk by faith, not by sight, and we are confident and satisfied to be out of the body and at home with the Lord.
At home.
Yeah, at home.
Yeah. So it was kind of, that is what got me, because we were watching the live stream at home, and I know it means like with our spiritual, you know, with our lives. But if you really think it, like just see at home with the Lord, like just being in my house, you know, still being with the Lord, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So we're not in the body of the church, you know, but like with our congregation, but at home still with the Lord, like we can still be what we're supposed to be doing, walking with Jesus, you know.
That's right.
So I was just like, wow.
So this is a time, like my church is really energized. Like, so we literally did a whole church Zoom call tonight. And it was, there was literally over 100 people on this thing. And
Yep.
it was it was crazy, but it's good because it almost brought tears in my eyes because I'm seeing people that I care about a lot, and I see them 2 or 3 times a week, and it's really hard to not be together, so it's good that we're going to be doing Bible studies. It's going to bring the technology to be able to bring us church together. And right now, just doing what we're doing here on all of these different platforms, bringing Christ to people who are really much in a lot of desperation. That I heard someone say that
there was someone who, in her apartment complex, someone had committed suicide today because of this whole thing going on, and
Yeah.
it's just that spirit of fear, and we, you know, we really as Christians need to stand up and help others know who He really is and how He can help us. So,
Yeah.
all right, let's sing the Holy Spirit. There's nothing worth more that can ever come close. Nothing can compare. You're our living hope. Your presence, Lord.
I'm tasted and seen of the sweetest of loves, when my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. Your presence, Lord. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for. To be overcome by your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. There's nothing worth more that will ever come close. Nothing compare. You're our living hope. Hallelujah. Thank you, Jesus. Your presence, Lord.
I've tasted and seen of the sweetest of loves, where my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. By your presence, Lord. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for. To be overcome by your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's right. The atmosphere. Your glory, God, our hearts long for. To be overcome by your presence, Lord.
Your presence, Lord. We worship you, Father. We worship you, Jesus.
Facebook's working. What's going on? Aware of your presence, let us experience the glory of your goodness.
Let us become more aware of your presence. Let us experience the glory of your your presence. Let us experience the glory of your goodness.
Let's become more aware of your presence. Let us experience the glory of your goodness. Oh, Holy Spirit, you are
welcome here. Come flood this place. Fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for. To be overcome
by your
presence, Lord. Sir.
All right. That was good. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Have a good one.
You too. Thank you. Thank you. Let's see. As it asked me to save. Now it's going to ask me to save. Now it asked me to quit 12 times. Goodness. Smule. I tell you what. Anthony's over on Facebook, but Facebook's not showing me. Are you sure you're still there? Leave this page. Pet.
Hey.
Hey.
All right, so I'm thinking Good Father by Chris Tomlin.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Good Father. Good Father. 12,000 versions. We'll see if this is a good one. Very interested to see. Facebook was not working earlier. Now it's all of a sudden working. I wonder when it's
Well.
Oh, so it was working, and I didn't pray for Sarah Brown. Oh, see? And it didn't even show up in the comments either, which is really weird. All right, let me pull this. Just give me 1 second. I'm sorry.
Don't worry about it.
I'm driving myself nuts at home. You and
I think
everybody
we
else.
all are.
I think we're all pretty much there. It's gonna be
I'm definitely going crazy.
it's gonna be lots of therapy after this. I can guarantee
Lots of therapy.
you. That's a good
It's
thing we
already
got.
getting up there.
Good thing we got. Travis. Oh, because I joined. Oh, it's because you joined. That's right. It started working because he joined. Oh, Sarah, I'm sorry, I missed that, but we're going to pray for Sarah real quick. Father God, we lift up Sarah tonight, God. We just pray for the dizziness and the ringing in her left ear, God, the issues with her gum and her teeth, and God, we pray against that, that acid reflux and the digestive issues and issues with her toes, God. We just ask that you clear all of these, heal them in Jesus' mighty and powerful name, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. He wants to go back to work on Thursday. So go back to work on Thursday. So he works in network.
Go back to work.
He works in network operations, and he's by himself all night long. So he can actually go back to work if he wants to. Unless the governor decides to say no, you can't. But
Nope. Even though you're alone, you can't go back to work.
Yeah, right. Well, he works 1 to that's all right. You'll be good. Welcome on your first day on Periscope, Infinity Love 88. Interesting username. All right. Good Father. Oh, I didn't ask you. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Such a number one hog, you know? Oh, she's there. Perfect. I've heard 1,000 stories of what they think you're like, but I've heard the tender whisper of love, and the dead of night, and you tell me that you're pleased and that I'm never alone. You're a good, good father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. Oh, and I've seen many searching for answers far and wide, but I know we're all searching for answers only you provide, 'cause you know just what we need before we say a word. Good, good Father, it's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. 'Cause you are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. Oh, he's perfect. You are perfect in all of your ways. Oh, you're perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. Oh, it's love so undeniable. I can hardly speak. He's so unexplainable. I can hardly think as you call me. Deeper still as you call me. Deeper still as you call me. Deeper still into love. Love, love. Good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You're a good, good Father. Perfect in all of your ways. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. You're perfect in all of your ways. I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. Who you are. Oh. That's a good place.
That's a good place.
It's a real good place. This has been happening a lot lately.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, this has been happening a lot lately. Hey, Cebu, thanks for joining. I still can't, Cebu, I can't like follow you. Oh, wait a minute, maybe I am now. She had accidentally, oh my goodness. Now I went and blocked her. How did that happen?
Oh no.
was thinking, my goodness. This phone is acting really bad.
Gosh, tell me
No.
about it.
Now it's saying she's not, oh my goodness.
All right,
I
I
don't
can
want
deal
her.
with that. All right, Sue, you're up next.
Thank you, I'm
I'll
sorry.
be back again.
I
Probably.
accidentally blocked her for some reason. Thank you, buddy. Sorry, Cebu, if you're there, I didn't mean to block
I missed
you.
the button. Ha.
My big fat finger broke it. Oh, yeah, definitely follow Pat. He's a new member of the Sing Pray Love group as well, and he's definitely. If something breaks, just say that. I have to drive in to fix it. Got it. Yeah, exactly. Big man throwing the builds. Yes, they are. Yeah. And for when I work for a technology company, so we are like beyond busy, like unbelievable. I feel bad for people who are losing their jobs, but we're so busy. It is not even funny. We normally get about 100 tickets a day, and we're getting about 300 tickets a day now, so we're pretty busy. I don't work on tickets, thankfully. Wow, 3 wanting to join. That's interesting. Oh, I like it.
Take your part and press start.
You know what? Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Catch a tiger by the toe. If he hollers, let him go. Your hubby's a truck driver? God bless him, because he's bringing us toilet paper and chicken that's missing.
Chicken.
Listen, this chicken's missing from the supermarket, just saying. Best Buy still.
From the highest of heights to the depths of the sea, creation's revealing your majesty. From the colors of fall to the fragrance of spring, every creature unique in the song that it sings, all exclaiming, indescribable, uncontainable. You place the stars in the sky and you know them by name. You are amazing, God. All powerful, untamable, awestruck, we fall to our knees as we humbly proclaim. You are amazing, God.
Who has told every lightning bolt where it should go? Or seen heavenly storehouses laden with snow? Who imagined the sun and gave source to its light, yet conceals it to bring us the coolness of night? None can fathom, indescribable, uncontainable. You place the stars in the sky and you know them by name. You are amazing, God. All powerful, untainable. You fall to my knees as you humbly proclaim. You are amazing, God. You are amazing, God. Indescribable, uncontainable. You place the stars in the sky and you know them by name. You are amazing, God.
miss you. Now it's asking to save. That's good.
Yeah.
That one. Asking me. It is lagging. Is it lagging? I don't know. Is it? I don't want that. I just want the messages. Messages. New message to Cebu.
What's up?
Nothing much, man. Just trying to send a message to someone that I accidentally. Oh. That person can't be messaged. Interesting. Cebu 7, I can't message them. They got me blocked. There's like some weird thing, just like what happened. I just accidentally blocked somebody on Periscope just because of my big fat thumb. It just happens.
What do you want to sing?
I
don't know. You let me know. Just throw some out there and I can see.
Well. Oh, King of Glory.
Yeah, you like that?
I haven't not sung that one, I don't think.
It's King of Glory. Have you ever heard it?
Yeah, I have heard it. I've never sung it, but it's a great song.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. We can try. Listen. Make a joyful noise, if anything.
Yep.
She is in this room. Who's in this room? Who orders? What is up with that?
She said,
I don't know. Oh, somebody. Oh, yeah. Well, Jesus is here for sure. But I'm going to give you part one. I'll give you part one.
what?
Just in case. And if I go like this, that means you keep rolling with it, right?
Art.
No. That's on a different app. More like Jesus. Come on, Periscope.
Yes, the world will bow down and say you are God. Every man will bow down and say you are King. So let's start right now. Why would we wait? King of glory, feel this place. I just want to be with you. I just want to be with you. Of glory, feel this place. Just want to be with you. I just want to be with you.
Yes, world will bow down and say you are God. Every man will bow down and say you are King.
So let's start right now. Why would we wait? We can praise you now in victory. King of glory, fill this place. Just wanna be with you. Oh, just wanna be with you. King of glory, fill this place. So listen to this. So we'll sing hallelujah till you come again, and we'll dance in your presence till you come again.
Now just sing hallelujah till you come again, and I'll dance in your presence till you come again. We will sing hallelujah till you come again. Yes, we'll dance in your presence till you come again. We will sing hallelujah till you come again. And we'll dance in your presence, dance in your presence, dance in your presence, dance in your presence, oh King of glory, fill this place. Just wanna be with you. I just wanna be with you. King of glory, fill this place. Just wanna be with you. Just wanna be with you. 'Cause King of glory, fill this place. King, oh, sorry, glory, fill this place. King of glory, fill this place. King of healing, fill this place. King of my peace, fill this place. King of my joy, fill this place. King of power, King of glory. And I'll dance in your presence, 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 and I'll sing hallelujah, sing hallelujah, sing hallelujah, sing hallelujah, sing hallelujah, sing hallelujah, sing hallelujah. 'Cause King of glory, fill this place. Just wanna be with you. Just wanna be with you. Wow, man. That was really good. I didn't realize how high that song and hard it is. That's a bit high for me, but yeah.
Yes, it's really high for me because I was like about to I didn't, and it's really, you can't hardly sing it low because it won't sound right.
No. But it was worth a try though, right? And it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We praise God there, and it doesn't
Yep.
matter.
Joyful noise. What church you go to?
I go to a Bible church, a non-denominational Bible church. So
Okay,
and
that's cool.
yeah, right around the corner from me. So nice little
Yeah.
church.
My church, I could literally walk to my church right now.
I could too. It's a 4-minute drive, and if I
Yeah.
hoof it, it'd probably take me about 15 minutes across the cornfield. So
Yeah. Wow.
yeah,
Well,
thanks for
I
singing.
don't know
with me.
how long you're gonna. Yep, I appreciate it.
Yeah. We stay until I don't know, until I get really tired or there's no one else.
Yeah, I was trying to think. Let me see. There was this one song I was sang in their youth group. Oh my lord, and I forgot it. Oh wow, it ain't it ain't coming back to me. But look, there's someone ready to sing.
Oh, there we go. Pro singer.
I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. Let's see. This is
First of all, before we do this scene, I want to say I'm inspired by you every day, and my mom has a crush on you. Okay, let's sing. Let's do the Heart of Worship.
You have headphones?
No,
That's not gonna work.
that's kind of sad.
Yeah, sorry. Need headphones, pro singer. Yeah, this is not gonna work if without headphones. That's pretty interesting. Inspired by him daily, and his mom has a crush on me. That's interesting. It's all good. Guys, if any prayer requests, praise reports, anything like that, you can certainly definitely put those in the chat streams as well. While we're singing, we will pray when we take a break. So
Wasn't quite sure where that was going.
I was allowing it for a moment, but like no headphones. Like I would have sang with them if there was headphones. It's just,
I was waiting for the song pick, and I was like,
I was like, oh, that's a good pick. But
anyway.
someone was requesting
Oh, request. Yay, I like request.
Reckless Love.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
You are gonna have to show me later at some point how to see the comics on Periscope. Like I see your screen and I see them scrolling like on the video feed, but I don't see them down at the bottom. Like
How are you holding your phone?
Either way, it doesn't matter. It won't show me them scrolling. Like I see the little bubbles in your look. I can show you.
Yeah. Show me.
But I'm like, it doesn't. So I can't read it because it's so blurry.
Hey, Angel, thanks for joining.
Okay. Unplug.
And there's Sue.
All right, so I held it like this. You see over here? I
Yeah.
can see that, but I can't read them. Down here where they're supposed to be, nothing. It doesn't scroll. I turn it. I can kind of try to read them, but
Yeah, no,
it's
that's-
blurry. I can't read them.
Yeah, that's. You don't see Angel just did she just wrote blessings.
No, nothing.
That's so.
And it tells me down here in the gray area, it'll tell me every now and then.
Are you
scroll
logged?
to see
Oh, you gotta
comics?
be logged in.
I scroll and it won't do anything.
That's weird.
But
Is that
we can do
Apple?
later?
Or is that
Huh?
Android?
No, it's for Android.
It's an Android.
Later.
I don't know. I have to consult my
What's on what was the request?
my Android friend, Reckless Love.
See, I see the little hearts popping up. Whoever's doing the little hearts, I see those scrolling.
Yeah, that's
And I can
Angel.
see, it says 7 people, but when I click on viewers, I only see 2, Angel and me.
Yeah, because there's people watching from the web.
Oh,
So people that are watching from the web that don't have a login, it will just show as a person watching.
right.
Yeah, because you can watch it like like TV. They try to make it like a TV.
Gotcha.
So,
Well,
so
explain that to me
Reckless
later.
Love. Yes,
Load
ma'am.
our song.
Yes, ma'am.
I give the people what they want.
Exactly.
They don't want to hear me yapping.
All right. Let's pick this one because I know the person. Pit Bull Beer Master. How you doing, buddy? Thanks for coming.
That's a name.
That is a name. He's a cool dude, though. His broadcasts are really interesting.
I'm just talking about how long it is. That's a
There's
long
some
name.
there's some long ones, that's for sure.
Pick your partner stuff. That does not sound good.
No. Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You don't like it? We can change it. You don't like it? You like the
You
original?
picked an acoustic version, didn't you?
I'm an acoustic. I just picked a version.
Stop. Don't touch anything.
I'm okay.
I think I have that saved somewhere. I didn't say put your hands up. It's not a hold up. It's okay.
I am fine, Pitbull, man. What's going on, brother? I hope you're doing well. I haven't been on Periscope in a while. Just kind of ignoring social media for a little bit.
What part did you pick? I don't remember.
I did one.
That's better. I gotta have my bass.
Yep. Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. And you have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Ooh.
When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. And oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, no lie you won't tear down, coming after me.
There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. Snow you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Snow shadow you won't lie down, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, no lie you won't after me. Snow shadow you won't lie down, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. Snow wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99, and I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
Hey, Shannon. Josh, you better come up here and sing with me, brother. Thank you. Got some viewers on Periscope today. That's good. Oh, there's Josh. Thank you. You guys are about this guy. This guy. Bless my ears several times on Periscope.
Hey,
How are you, man?
I've been good, man.
You said your brother's in New York?
Yeah, he's in New York, so
He quarantining himself, keeping himself locked in?
yeah, it's pretty crazy up there. He was actually on his longboard, and he said that New York was pretty empty. It was
Yeah.
like a ghost town over there.
That's crazy. That is crazy. What song would you like to sing, buddy?
What about Waymaker?
Let's do Waymaker. Have you used this app before?
Yes.
All right. And you know about the lag? All right.
Yeah.
All right. So what'll happen is, the best way to handle the laggy is to see the 3 little dots on the bottom there, little sliders.
Yeah.
All right, that'll give you, if you go to like the one with the ups and downs, that'll give you like studio and super studio. So I'm on studio, so it's giving me a little bit of echo and stuff. So that'll put you like in the same, and then over where the little speaker is, there's vocals. When we start singing, you want to turn host vocals all the way down. So that way you'll sing to the music and the words and not to me. Because you're going to hear me in delay is what's going to happen, and it'll throw you all off. So, trust me. All right, Anthony, have a nice day. All right, so now that we got that part figured out, let's do Waymaker. I got to find the right one, though, because I keep pulling up the wrong one. It's the purple one, that's all I know. That's the right one. You want part 1 or part 2?
Part 2.
Part 2? Okay. You too, Anthony. Be safe. Be well. Come on, Internet. Be nice. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you.
You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you.
You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you.
You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you.
Hey, waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you. I worship you.
You are here, healing every heart. I worship you. I worship you.
You are here, turning lives around. I worship you. I worship you.
You are here, mending every heart. I worship you. I worship you.
Hey, yeah. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Whoa, waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You wipe away all tears, you mend the broken hearts. You're the answer to it all, Jesus.
You wipe away all the tears, you mend all the broken hearts. You're the answer to it all, Jesus.
Hey, waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Yeah, you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you. I worship you.
You are here, meeting every need.
Thank you.
I worship you. I worship you. Hey.
Awesome.
All right. God bless you.
Bless you too, brother. You mind if I save that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks, brother. Man,
All
it's good
right.
singing with you.
That was fun.
Awesome.
All right. God bless you.
Bless you too, bro. Be safe.
That is not TikTok.
That is not TikTok. That is a new experience.
Hey, my friend.
How you doing, friend?
Doing good. I said I would come by and sing a song with you before I go to bed.
Sounds like a plan.
How's things going today?
Things are going really good today, actually. Yeah. This is so amazing that even a day like this, in a world like this, we can still do worship in this app. Praise God
Exactly.
for that.
Exactly.
Exactly. What would you like to sing, sir?
Let me see here. Trying to think what we sang last night. Let's see.
I think we sang In the Garden last night.
We did it in the garden last night. That's right. How about this one here? Do you know this one?
Oh, yeah.
You want to go first or second?
You pick. Yes, so glad. Exactly. Hey, Lorenzo.
When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well, it is well with my soul.
Though Satan should through trials and should come, let the blessed assurance control. Tongue-tied today.
That Christ has regarded my helpless estate and has shed his own blood for my soul. It is well.
It is well
with my soul.
with my soul.
It is well. It is well with my soul.
My sin, oh, the bliss of this glorious thought. My sin, not in part, but the whole.
Well, it's nailed to the cross, and I bear it no more. Praise the Lord, praise the Lord, oh my soul.
It is well
It is well
with my soul.
with my soul.
It is well. It is well with my soul.
And Lord, haste the day when my face shall be sight. The clouds be rolled back as a scroll. The trump shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Even so, it is well with my soul.
It is well
with my soul.
with my soul.
It is well. It is well with my soul. It is well. Great job. That was amazing.
Thank you. You did well too.
Thank you so much.
Sir, thank you much. Have a nice night. Good sleep.
You too.
Sir.
I sure enjoyed it.
Yes, thank you. All right. 1 second, Robert. Just give me 1 second. All right. Lorenzo, you're still over there, buddy. Good. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
So,
What songs do you know? Let's see. I'm guessing these ones are my songs down at the bottom. What songs do you know? What song? Any worship songs?
I know a lot of worship songs. I know Lauren Daigle. I know Talkbox. I know Toby Mac.
And Toby Mac. It's a little late here for Toby Mac, but Lauren Daigle. Let's see. Back your phone. Work with me. Sure. Every time that I want it to be here. You want to do You Say?
Yeah, sure. I love that
Pull
song.
that one up. Yeah, that's a good song. I haven't done it tonight either, so it's good. All right, there we go. You want part 1 or part 2?
I'll do part 1.
Okay.
You don't mind.
Sure. You want part 1, you said. All right, I'll take part 2. I'm good with that.
I keep fighting voices in my mind that say I'm not enough. Every single lie that tells me I will never measure up.
Am I more than just the sum of every high and every low? Remind me once again just who I am, because I need to know.
You say I love, and I can feel them. You say I am strong, and I think I am weak.
You say I am held when I am falling short, when I don't belong. You say I am yours,
And I believe, I believe what you say of me. I believe.
The only thing that matters now is everything you think of me.
In you I find my worth, in you I find my identity.
You say I am love when I can't feel a thing. You say I am strong when I think I am weak. Oh, it's gonna smell. And I believe
taking all I had and now I'm laying it at your feet. You have every failure, God, you have every victory.
You say I am loved when I can't feel a thing. You say I am strong when I think I am weak. You say I am held when I am falling short, when I don't belong. Oh, you say I am yours,
And I believe, oh I believe what you say to me. I believe,
yes, I believe. Say of me, oh, I
Yes, I love that. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
That was great.
Awesome.
Do
Can I
you
save
mind
that?
Yeah.
All right, great. Save that. All right. Well, welcome and thanks for joining. And I'm gonna give you a follow. Just there we go. And come on back. Every Tuesday we're here. Every Tuesday night. And then there's worship Wednesdays, and there's worship on Mondays, worship on Fridays, and there's like family friendly on Friday night as well. So,
Okay.
yes, we're a group called Sing, Pray, Love. Thanks for joining.
Okay. Bye.
So, bye. Thank you. All right. You followage. You came here a while ago and don't even remember what happened. I followage. Oh, you followed me. Oh, perfect. Thanks. Thank you. Sue, give me 1 second because I'm gonna shut down the broadcasts on the other one. So, no, how long have I? Oh, I don't know. I don't really look at the statistics of things. I'm not here yet. Lorenzo, my friend. He's like, no, I'm here still. I think someone wants to sing with me. Oh, they're not here. So then I won't shut it down. I'll bring up Sue. What song did you want? Let's see. He wanted a song. Let's see. Lorenzo. Our God is an awesome God. You know that song?
Oh, what?
Our God is an awesome God. He reigns
Yeah,
heaven above with wisdom. Is that like?
I do know that, yes. Is that what somebody wants us to sing?
Yeah. I don't know the name of the song though. Is it Our God?
That's it. Yeah. Hang on. There's different versions.
Is it like the Rich Mullins or no? No. No. It's Chris Tomlin.
If I could type.
I got a once slender UK piano man, a new Ella, Life by Joyce. Oh, they actually put the person who uploads a song.
All right.
That's.
Are you ready? Because I have a
Oh, I'm
version
sorry.
here.
I'm not paying attention. I'm just looking. Like usual. Go ahead.
I think this is a good one. We'll see what happens.
OGXX Legendary. You haven't been here for 6 months? Well, welcome back. Thank you for joining. Appreciate you joining the broadcast.
I don't know if this is
It is. It's just starting off fancy.
really slow.
Seems slow. is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God.
Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God.
God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God.
Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God.
Our God is an awesome God. He reigns from heaven above with wisdom, power, and love. Our God is an awesome God.
Our God is an awesome God.
It's an awesome God. There you go, Lorenzo.
There it is.
Thank you. Is there me on the list?
I don't think so.
Just us. I get to pick one.
You do.
Mm-hmm.
You've earned it.
No.
What?
No? Are you good?
Shoulder was hurting.
Oh, sorry.
Her shoulder blade. I don't know what to do with.
He is jealous for me. Love's like a hurricane. I am a tree bending beneath the weight of his wind and mercy.
When all of a sudden I am unaware of these afflictions eclipsed by glory, and I realize just how beautiful you are and how great your affections are for me.
And oh, how he loves us so. Oh, how he loves us. How he loves us all.
He is jealous for me. Love's like a hurricane. I am a tree bending beneath the weight of his wind and mercy.
loves us. We done good on that one.
Did we? Okay.
I think so. That sounded pretty well. So we got Saved by Grace. All right, we're just gonna make the room. We're gonna start shutting it down. Actually.
Hi, brother.
How you doing?
I'm good.
What would you like to say?
You know, I'm just, I just want to listen, but, and then suddenly I feel like I want to sing with you.
That's good.
Yep. Do you know Casting Crowns, Oh My Soul?
Oh, yes.
I love that song. Do you have, can you pull that song for me?
I certainly can.
Thank you, sir.
Oh my.
Is my mic too loud? No.
No, you're good.
How's the situation there?
Well, where I live,
Yeah,
it's not bad because I live out in the country, so we're kind of a rural county. So, and the next county over is Buffalo, New York, and they have, I think they have 100 confirmed cases.
Yeah, it's not going down. It's still adding up. You know.
No,
That's
New York State's like they're like doubling it every night.
Yeah. Well, I'm from California, so same thing.
Yeah. They said we're still not at the peak yet.
I know. Yeah. And they said, according to some experts, that probably if it won't be taken care of, we're gonna probably 50% of the U.S. will get affected by it.
Yeah. The good thing is that for majority of the people that do get it, they either don't know they have it, number one, or they don't get it. Like they recover. You know, it's like You know, so.
That's true.
But it's unfortunate for some of the older and youngers. You know. You want part one or part two?
Yeah, I'll take the part one.
Okie dokie.
All right.
Oh, how you worry, oh, how you weary from feeling you lost control. This was the one thing you didn't see coming, no one blamed you true. If you cried in private, if you tried to hide it away, oh, no one knows, no one will see. You stop believing. Oh, my soul, you are not alone. There's a place where we, there's this praise the God you know. One more day, He will make a way. Let Him show you how you can lay this down. 'Cause you're not alone. Here and now, you can be honest. I won't try to promise that someday it all works out. 'Cause this is the valley. And even now He is breathing on your dry bones. And there will be dancing, and there will be beauty where
God, you know.
And one more day, He will make a way. Let me show you how you can lay this down. 'Cause you're not alone. So my soul, you're not alone. I love that song.
That's a great song. It is. That's in my top 10 for sure. That song. Because it just puts you in a place, you know. It's kind of centers you into.
The message is so satisfying, you know. That's like.
But it's so simple too, right?
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
That's
And also, I also have this. I love this another Casting Crown songs. Does anybody hear her?
Yeah. You want to do that one?
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's do that. I don't know.
Nobody on the list? Oh, you have Zootopia.
That's Sue. That's okay.
Okay.
You can sing.
One more, Sue.
Sue's okay. I'm pretty sure Sue's okay. Sue's a pretty good friend of mine, so. She kind of co-hosts for me, admin for me, and co-host. So.
You want me to pull the song?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm like, if you can.
Okay, I'm gonna check. Does anybody?
We got over on Periscope. Luminous Writings. Shanna, thank you for coming back, Shanna.
Okay, you wanna part one? Or?
Oh. Sure.
All right.
Oh, low power mode. Uh-oh, hold on a second. Some power is there. She is running 100 miles an hour in the wrong direction. She is trying, but the canyon's ever widening in the depths of her cold. So she set out another misadventure. 2 years older, she's 3 steps behind. Does anybody hear her? Can anybody see? Or does anybody even know that she's going down today? Under the shadow of her steeple, with all the lost and lonely people, searching for the hope that's tucked away in you and me. Does anybody hear her? Can anybody see?
She's young, baby, shelter and affection that you never found her home. She is searching for a hero to ride in and save the day. And he wants her with charming, and he knows just what to say. Momentary lapse of reason, and she gives herself away. Does anybody hear her? Can anybody see? Doesn't anybody even know she's going down today? Under the shadow of our steeple, with all the lost and lonely people, searching for the hope that's locked away on you and me. Does anybody hear? can anybody see?
If judgment looms on Derby steeple, if lofty glances from lofty people can't see past her,
if judgment looms on every people, and lofty glances from lofty people can see the pastor's calling letter, and we never even met her. Never even met her. Does anybody hear her? Can anybody see? Or does anybody even know she's going down today? Under the shadow of our steeple, with all the lost and lonely people, searching for the hope that tucked away from you and me. Does anybody hear? Does anybody see? Does anybody even know she's going down today? Under the shadow of our steeple, with all the lost and lonely people, searching for the hope that tucked away from you and me. Does anybody hear? Can anybody see? He's running 100 miles an hour in the wrong direction. All right, brother.
good song. Thank you.
Good song, thank you. Okay, I'm gonna step down so Sue can sing.
Thank you.
Nice singing with you, brother.
Nice singing with you too, brother. Thank you so
All right,
much.
God bless.
Bless you too. All right, all right, all right. Sue, 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 Sue. Don't be it, don't be it, don't be it, don't be it, don't be it. I had to do it at least once tonight.
I didn't even hear it.
Nah. Guess you'll have to go back and catch the replay. It's nearing 1 a.m., so I got some like new people over on YouNow, which is
Hi, new people.
surprising. Oh, it's Nair. Okay, I know Nair. I'm sorry. Ain't really nobody else watching, so I'm just gonna shut down those other ones. So, oh, and of course, Lorenzo comes back. Yes, Lorenzo, you came back. Thank you. I'm not shutting down that. Something different, but maybe something new. I want to do clean, but
I was figuring that. I was like, that's what he's waiting for.
I like that song. I'm sorry. I like it.
There's nothing wrong with that.
I'm not taking part 2. I think that was a mistake last time. I see shattered, you see whole. I see broken, but you see beautiful. And you're helping me to believe. You're restoring me piece by piece. There's nothing too dirty
that
you can't make worthy.
You wash me in mercy, and I am clean.
There's nothing too dirty
that
you can't make worthy. Wash me in mercy, I am clean.
What was dead now lives again. My heart's beating inside my chest, and I'm coming alive with joy and destiny. 'Cause you're restoring me piece by piece. There's nothing too dirty that you can't make worthy. You wash me in mercy, and I am clean. There's nothing too dirty that you can't make worthy. You wash me in mercy, and I am clean.
Washed in the blood of your sacrifice. Your blood flowed red and it made me white.
My dirty rags are purified. I'm clean.
Washed in the blood of your sacrifice.
Your blood flowed red and made me white. My dirty rags are purified. I'm clean. Washed in the blood of your sacrifice. Your blood flowed red and made me white. My dirty rags are purified.
I knew it. I'm getting spoiled.
What?
I'm getting smuled.
Well, can't be having that. That's because you saved all them songs.
That's what. Actually, I saved a lot of them, but maybe. All right. I'm just gonna shut down another broadcast, and we'll. Good night, friend. Oh, it's really like super bad. All right, I'm gonna shut down another broadcast, and then we'll pray over the broadcast. Father God, I thank you for this amazing night tonight to be able to worship you and be able to spend some time with my friends and fellow Christians and those that didn't even know you, God. I just thank you for the time and the ability and for us to be able to be here and be able to share our love for you, God. Be able to just get into your word and know who you are and what you want from us. God, we just thank you for every single person that came into this broadcast and ask for blessings upon them as well as protection and healing from
this virus that's out there. God, we just ask this in Jesus' mighty, powerful, and amazing name we pray. Amen. All right, I'm going to... Relax, penguin, relax. All right, hold the fort for a second. I'll be right back because it's going to...
Yeah, I think it is time to shut down pretty soon there, Mr. Lorenzo. Just give
Give
us
us a second. There we go.
All right. And I got Smealed. So, it's, welcome to technology.
What
Round
is
and round and round to go. Round and round and round we go. Round and round
And round we go. Where it stops, nobody knows.
It didn't work the other way, so try
All right,
it.
so I'll just drop and then I'll pick you back up again and we can do the closing out song. Whatever song.
All right. Take the
Lead,
lead.
there we go. All right. I think we might be in a good position, but let's see. See, she got Smealed too. What is going on with this thing? It's just being bad. It's being just bad. All kinds of bad. All right.
I had to reject it's like, take the lead. I'm like, nope.
Nope.
I had to reject it so it would go back to you.
Nice. All right, so thank you all for joining. Thank you for all the hearts and invites, follows, and shares. Remember, you can send email to me at jason@jesusdidit.org if you have any prayer requests or have any questions. This weekend, this Saturday at, I'm believing, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, we will be having a question and answer like Q&A style broadcast, group broadcast on the Periscope and Facebook of the Jesus Did It TV accounts. So follow at Jesus Did It TV on Facebook and on Periscope, and come on and listen to the questions and answers we got. We got some of them emailed to us, and mostly Christian-based stuff. You know, what there'll be some interesting answers because some people in the group, we have a little bit different theology. So it'll be interesting to see the different responses. That'll be kind of cool. So thank you so much for joining. And yeah, I guess we'll sing a song on the way out for those guys, if you don't mind. What would you like to sing, Sue? What's on your heart? Hey, Rich. Are you picking one? Oh, she got up already. Oh, there we go. I like that one. I hope I picked it right. I barely know that song, but I haven't sung it yet. Grander is quake before, moved by the sound of his voice.
Seas that are shaken and stirred can be calmed and broken from my regard. Through it all, my eyes are on you. Through it all, it is well. Through it all, my eyes are on you.
be it from me to not believe, even when my eyes can't see.
And this mountain that's in front of me will be thrown into the midst of the sea. Through it all, my eyes are on you. Through it all, it is well. Through it all, my eyes are on you, and it is well. It is well.
So let go, my soul, and trust in Him. The waves and wind still know His name.
So let it go, my soul, and trust in Him. The waves and wind still know His name.
Waves and so let go, my soul, and trust